What I'm hoping to do with this talk today is, first of all, just talk about why we need to record and monitor butterflies, the methods we use to monitor the butterflies, and also I'm going to touch on a bit of how you can monitor the habitat of butterflies as well in quite a low-key way, which is very accurate. And what I'm going to do then finally is go through all the butterflies you'll see in Warwickshire and give you some ID tips. And hopefully, if this works, you'll all be confident in identifying all these butterflies when you go out in the field. Right, just to give you a picture of Warwickshire, all our recording is done on a 2-kilometre basis, or tetrad. And this is our branch area covering 620 tetrads. And for those who like the old natural history system, this is Vice County 38, more or less. There's just bits in Birmingham, which our friends in the West Midlands branch cover for us. And this is the first part of what we try and do. Every 5 years, we try and make sure that everywhere in the county is thoroughly recorded. And by doing that, we try and get 10 species in every one of those tetrads. And you can see it here in the 2010 to 14 period, we did do that. And we've done it equally in the latest period, 2015 to 19 as well. Now, the importance of this is we try and make sure everywhere is recorded. Now, butterflies fluctuate wildly, but they also decline and increase rapidly as well. So having this recording every 5 years is very important. To make sure every square is thoroughly recorded, as part of getting those 10 species, we always look to get these 5 widespread species in every tetrad as well. And that's the orange tip up here, the green vein white there, speckled wood, gatekeeper and meadow brown. And the reason we do this, these species come out at different times of the year and also are found in different types of habitat. So it's about recording every tetrad thoroughly. And you can see here in the last recording period, I haven't put gatekeeper up, but we got all those species in all those 620 tetrads as well. So why is that important? Well, here's a distribution map of the Essex skipper, and this was in 95 to 99. And you can see it had very much a easterly distribution in Warwickshire. And if I actually overlaid all the major A roads and motorways, you'd find that this butterfly was basically found all the way next to these big habitats and wasn't found actually anywhere else other than sort of road verges. Now that's the map from 2010 to 14. You can see just in those few years, the Essex skippers rapidly colonised the whole of Warwickshire. Now, this is just to demonstrate the importance of recording. And what we'll say here is, because our recording is so good, we can make a statement like the Essex skipper has now increased and is found all over Warwickshire, because we have these 2 very strong databases. Now, it might seem obvious, but this is what we need to have and accept a record. We obviously need to know the date the butterfly was recorded. We need a 6-figure grid reference, obviously the name of the species, but important, we need the number of that species, because a lot of old natural history clubs or old butterfly collectors just used to do species lists. And consequently, 100 years later, we don't really know how common some of these species were, or was it just a vagrant passing through a particular place? And of course, if we have any queries, we want to know the name of the recorder and their contact details so we can get back to them and just make sure our database is as accurate as possible. We like to make things easy in Warwickshire. So if you ever look at our website, you go to recording and this page comes up. And it's, again, trying to make things as easy as possible. So you can see there, just put your details in there, what species you've seen, how many, and you press submit. Now, the great thing about this system is, you know it's all work because a little email comes back to you saying, thanks for your record. And we've got a couple of people in the branch that verify the records. So what happens is, these get verified within 24 hours, and then everyone else in the county knows what species are being seen. And from our point of view, that I didn't know seeing the first of a butterfly each year was going to be a competitive sport, but it's apparently turned into that now. So lots of people like to get the first record or even the last record of a butterfly each year. Equally, we also promote iRecord, which is a free app you can get on your mobile phone to record. But The thing about that is we don't get the records normally till a month later. So you won't get your name in lights on our webpage or in the annual report. So I'm now going to talk about monitoring. So just to give you a flavour, obviously recording is good. It tells you where butterflies are and it tells you how they change in distribution. But monitoring tells you what the butterfly is doing. Now, butterflies are by far the best terrestrial animal indicator. Again, hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll agree with me, they're reasonably easy to identify. And the thing is, they change very rapidly with habitat changes, both positive and negative. So these are the methods I'm going to talk to in a minute. This is talk about the full transect, the species transect, the time count, the wider countryside, and the reduced method. And again, after this, I'll talk a little bit about habitat monitoring as well. So what's a full transect? Well, this is a lot of commitment. It's a site-based monitoring of butterfly populations. And because butterflies vary because of the weather, what we try and do is take out all the other variables. So when we know a butterfly population changes, we can say it's because of habitat rather than just the current weather conditions. You walk it between the 1st of April to the end of September, 20 weeks or 7-day periods as you're going along. You have a fixed route, and that's very important from year to year, because again, it's all about cutting the variables down. You record any habitat details. That's not in great shakes. It's for instance, if you were monitoring a meadow, you'd say sometime in July, oh yes, the farmer came in and took the hay cut, and you just make that note in the transect form. So we know we can relate that to any fall in butterfly numbers. Again, to keep the variables down, you have to do it in set weather conditions. So in simple terms, it's got to be warm enough for the butterflies to fly. So any temperature over 17 degrees is great. If it's cloudy, you can still record the butterflies if it's over 17. If it's between 13 and 17, then you need at least 6% sun. And again, beware that if there's dark clouds above, then the butterflies won't fly. So sometimes you just have to pause on your walk to let the dark cloud go past. And again, butterflies don't like windy conditions. And so we teach about the Beaufort scale. Basically, you want light winds, anything below 3 on the Beaufort scale. Now, a species transect is less intense. And as its name implies, it's just about recording normally rare species. And we normally only record 1 or 2 at the most on the species transect. The methodology is exactly the same as what I've just described for the full transect. But you only do it when the butterfly is flying. So you normally try and do it, again, this is where our website is useful. You normally start when the first one has been seen in the county, and you end it when you stop seeing the butterfly. And for most species, that's a maximum of about 10 weeks of recording. Now, the reduced method's interesting, and this is actually, we've done this to support many of our other partners like God's Acre, who monitor or try and create habitat in churchyards, or local parks people. So all you do is, it's the same methodology, fixed route, fixed weather conditions as a full transect, but you only do it 4 times a year. Now, because we monitor just over 100 sites in Warwickshire, even though this is less accurate, by just monitoring the best time in May, June, July and August, we can still get very good data and give people feedback about how their site is doing. So we can say how a species is doing on these sites, most species in most years. So it is a decent method. Finally, there's a time count, and this is to establish population sizes. And this is often used for species like the pearlboard fritillary that can move around a habitat following coppiced woodlands or something like that, or on sites where we can only get there probably once a year because access is a bit difficult to arrange. So you do it at the maximum flight period. So you go when you think the most of that particular species is flying. And what you do is you walk a zigzag path over the whole habitat where the butterfly will breed. And the key thing is you count the number of butterflies for a fixed period of time. Now, you do this each year. So imagine walking across a meadow. You walk in a zigzag, say, each zigzag is like 5 meters apart, and you count every butterfly. All the science behind this to say it's accurate has been done. Now, perhaps one year you've had 3 shredded wheat and you walk a bit quicker. Well, the fact is what you do is you get to the end of the meadow, you turn around and come back on yourself. It's the time that's vital, So for instance, if you say it's going to be for 10 minutes exactly, it's 10 minutes exactly. Another day you might be a bit sluggish and you don't quite get to the end of the meadow. The key is you actually just stop before you get to the end of the meadow. So that's the key with this particular species. All the science again has been done behind it by full scientists testing this. So we know if you follow the methods, it is very, very accurate. And as for habitat monitoring, again, you'll see here on the right-hand side, this is what we call a drop disc. It's a doweling rod with centimeters marked on it, and it's a 15 centimeter in diameter disc. Again, all the science behind this. The scientists say, if you drop this down, that doweling rod, where it stops is the turf height. Now, this is important for monitoring butterflies because they're very related to how their habitat is. So you drop this down the disc, you measure usually so something can be divided by 10 to make the maths easier, so you can get the average turf height across a particular meadow or woodland ride or something like that. Now, for particular species, you can actually make it more complicated. So if I was monitoring this for, say, the dingy skipper butterfly, I would actually drop the disc down to get the turf height, but I'd also look around the disc each time I drop it down for a particular food plant called common bird's-foot trefoil to see if it's present or not, which is a caterpillar food plant of that particular species. And so for each year, I can say what the average turf height is, in how many drops percentage-wise we found the bird's-foot trefoil, and also I might even record the amount of bare ground each time I drop the disc. And so you keep all these parameters for that particular rare species. And so if it changes one year that it's only 6% of the food plant present, it's not really serious. But obviously if you go back 1 year and it's only 10%, you know something's very, very wrong. And therefore you can take action to improve the habitat to get it back in condition for that particular rare butterfly. And then the importance, you should never monitor just because somebody says it's a good thing to do. You should monitor for a reason. And this is just to explain how we actually do our analysis of the monitoring each year. It's, as we say, it's not rocket science, but this is what we do. You can see all the species of butterfly are down the one side and all the sites that we monitor by transect are along the top. Now, again, if you think about it for analysis, some species of butterfly you only ever see in small numbers. So to make the analysis more thorough, we always pick, for instance, like the common blue down here, all those sites that recorded over 100. And you can see here in more detail for 2018, all these sites above recorded over 100 common blues. And in 2018, it had a good year. In most sites, when we compare 2018 to the mean of the previous 3 years, you can see it had big increases, well over 100%. But this is where the analysis starts to be interesting, because you can see there's 5 sites here, Brandon Marsh, Bucknell Meadows, etc., that all had below 100% increase. So when we look at this, we think, why did this happen? And of course, you know all these sites very well. I can tell you that all of these sites are ex-sand and gravel quarries, are very sandy, and they're free draining. We also know in 2018 what the weather was like, and we had a sort of mild drought. So all the sites that suffered with drought are all these with the sand and gravel. So we then can feed back to the owners of these sites. Look, your common blues didn't do as well, the low trend for that particular year, but don't worry, it's basically weather related, they will recover. And that's important, we can interpret what's happening. Again, for each sort of species, you can see here again, we just put all the sites up on the top and all the species down on the left. And again, sometimes what's happening in a year, if you look at small white, it obviously was a good year, varying on various sites because all the numbers are up. And then occasionally you'll see another site where you think, oh, what's happened here at Kumambi Meadow, Park Meadow? Everywhere else seems to have done well for the gatekeeper, but this hadn't. And then you look at what's happened to the management or not, and you can actually then feed that back to the site owner. And this is the importance. And this is an example of how we've given feedback in the past and how it's been acted on. So the key here is you do the science, you monitor how the butterflies are doing. In this case, the RSPB contacted us and said, we're very worried. If you look at the numbers down here of our dingy skipper, this rare butterfly, we're virtually hardly seeing any a year. Why is that? So we then go out to visit the site, and it's quite obvious when you get out there that sallow scrub had invaded all the grasslands around, and there was very little bird's foot trefoil. So it was What trefoil was there was being shaded, no good for the butterfly, and there was very little of its common bird's foot trefoil food plant. What did the RSPB do? Brilliant. That winter, they cleared all the scrub that was infected it, and they actually seeded it heavily with common bird's foot trefoil. And whoosh, you can see numbers responded very rapidly. And I can tell you in the last couple of years, they've gone up even further. So this is the power of having to monitor a site and giving people advice and how quickly butterflies will respond if you do things positively for them. Now, I've mentioned about monitoring, but I should also monitor that the transects and all these other methods doesn't really monitor certain species very well. This is because they spend most of their life in the canopy. So again, you've got here the brown hair streak, the white letter hair streak, the purple emperor, and the purple hair streak. So what we've had to do is come up with different methods to monitor these species accurately. If you have a look for these species, this is the sort of view you get. This is the purple emperor at its congregation area, and it will whiz by you. And unless you know what you're looking for, where to look, the chances of you seeing it are very slim. And this is my favourite one, the white letter hair streak. The amount of searches I've done for white letter hair streak and looked for it, and I've looked through binoculars, and this is the view you get. They tease you, they just look straight back at you, so you can't even see the side of the butterfly to make sure it's a white letter hair streak. And the purple hair streak, as soon as it hashes out, it flies straight to the top of oak trees, and normally, except for certain weather conditions, is never seen again. But we have methods to monitor these species. This has been monitored for over 30 years at Brighton, the purple hair streak. And because we know it becomes more active in the evening, that's normally between 6 and 8 o'clock in the evening. And if you ever want to see purple hair streaks anywhere on the Heart of England forest holdings, where there's oaks, you just go out in a nice muggy evening and look up, you'll see silver discs flying around the oak trees, and that's your purple hair streaks. And so you can see here by doing this, normally between about 6:30 in the evening and 7:30 in the evening, walking very similar to a normal transect, but of course you're looking up as opposed to down, you can accurately monitor these butterflies. Likewise, similarly for the purple emperor, what we like to do is find where the males congregate, or lek in birding terms, and you can see each week how many are flying around the congregation area, and it's not any. Normally, it's a decent site, you'll see 1, 2 or 3, or in good years, even more of that, the males combating each other, flying around. And again, so that's another way we can monitor a canopy species by just adapting the transect methods. And finally, the brown hair, if I say I've done a transect at Brighton for over 32 years, and it wasn't until 4 years ago I actually saw an adult brown hair streak on my transect, it just gives you an indication of how elusive these butterflies can be. But their eggs are relatively very easy to find. And so when we started managing Wrightwood Meadows in particular for this species, and that's by managing the blackthorn in a 4-year coppice rotation, we wanted to see if it was working. So each of these areas are a rotation of management with a particular grid reference you can see, the date we searched it, and also how long we spent searching it. So it's consistent each year. And just by doing this, because we know you can search a blackthorn for hours and find every egg, or you can just search the best bits and get a sample of how many eggs are there. And because we're doing this, we know this management is really working for the brown hair streak, and numbers are currently going through the roof. And so much so, I actually had 3 adults on my transect last year, which I was really pleased about. All this analysis goes into our annual report, and as I said, certainly everyone likes to get either the first or last sighting of the species because they get their name in the butterfly report. There's lots of stuff out there to help you BID. Old school, you can use all these field guides, but there's apps, as you say, where you can just put it on a mobile phone, it comes up and gives you an idea of what the butterfly is. There's even DVDs, so there's lots and lots of help out there. And also, we do mention that we've had people just take a photograph on a mobile phone from about 10 feet away of a butterfly, and they've sent it and say, what is this? I'm going to set myself up here, but most times we can tell you what it is. So let's get on to butterfly identification. Well, fortunately, there's clues to tell you which butterfly is which. First of all, the reason most people like butterflies is that you could say they're pretty. They've got very beautiful wings, so they do alter. But equally so, when you get into watching butterflies, there are certain ways certain butterflies fly. and that will give you a clue to what the species is. Come on to it later, but there's a species called a speckled wood. When it courts, the two males will battle and they'll spiral up very high from a woodland ride into the air. Once you've seen that, you know it can be no other species other than the speckled wood. In birding terms, they call that the jizz, or the way it flies. The habitat is often a clue. You know, if I say we don't have it in this county, the mountain ringlet, that might give you a clue to where you find that particular butterfly. But equally so around here, you get woodland butterflies and you get grassland butterflies. And though there's a little bit of overlap, you know, often things like the still-washed tureen and white admiral will stay within or close to, very close to a woodland. So the habitat will give you a clue to what type of butterfly you're seeing. The time of year is a big clue. Again, our website's useful because obviously you get early seasons and late seasons, but most butterflies either have one or two broods and they fly at a particular time. So you may have already seen the orange tip that's come out quite early this year, and it's flying now, and it will fly probably to the end of May, early June. And very occasionally you get some in August, but that is very, very occasionally. So normally the time of year is a big clue to when you see a butterfly, what it is. And didn't get a chance to update this, but there's 38 species of butterfly now in Warwickshire, excluding very rare migrants. So again, you haven't got to learn that many. So let's go through them and give you a few clues. The first three I'm going to talk about are what we call the three golden skippers. The first one here is the small skipper. And the key points here is, first of all, the way it lands on these knapweeds and thistles. It always sort of sits like that with its wings sort of partially open like that. It's all gold in this female, and it's a duller sort of orangey on the underneath. It's got a very close cousin called the Essex skipper, again, very orangey. This is the clue to the Essex skipper here. It has to have, like somebody stuck a rubber band on the end of its antennae, and it's black all the way round. In the males on the sex brand, the actual line that goes across here, which we'll see later, is shorter and is parallel to the forewing. So you can actually tell them when they've got the wings open as well. Now, we try and monitor these accurately, and there's various methods we do. Personally, what I do is I actually pop the butterflies at the end of my transect to make sure the ratio in a particular place is the same as what I've seen on the transect. Other people use close focusing binoculars to see the antennae here. And then finally, I've got one recorder that actually takes hundreds of mobile phone pictures and then looks at them when he gets home to see how many he saw. So it doesn't really matter as long as you try and be as accurate as possible. And finally, you've got the large skipper. This is what we call the sex brand in the males. This is where the scents come out from the male and make them more attractive to the females. And all these three species of skipper have done it. And now the big thing here is, first of all, notice how much more black is on the large skipper than the two others. And the other clue is, this is really a June species. If you see a golden skipper in June, it's going to be a large skipper, unless you get a very early season, start to get the other two. The small skipper actually tends to come out 7 to 10 days earlier than the Essex skipper. So if you see a very fresh, very orange skipper in the beginning of July, it's more likely to be a small skipper. If you start to see one at the end of July that's very fresh, it's more likely to be an Essex skipper. So again, get all these clues as you go through, but obviously you need to check them. So let's just go through this again. So large skipper, basically June species, these two July species. Though this will go through in very small numbers, most of them you see in June. These two look very, very similar, but you've got to look for the black tips on the Essex skipper, and there's only ever a dusting of black on the small skipper, but underneath it's orange. So you look at this in various ways to tell them apart. And again, this one comes out slightly earlier than the Essex skipper. So all these things are there to help you to tell you which one it is. The final two skippers we got in Warwickshire are much rarer. This is the grizzle skipper, and this is the dingy skipper. And really, there's no other species of butterfly that looks like these two. Some people say superficially a lattice heath moth can look like this, and somebody says that a Burnet companion moth can look like the dingy skipper, but really, when you've seen them side by side and seen them flying, there's nothing really looks like these two species. And both tend to come out, well, normally here in mid-May and just last into the first week or two of June. We are getting increasingly second brood sightings of both these species as well because of climate change. Going to move on to the whites. Another very, very rare butterfly. This is the wood white. To give you an indication of how rare this butterfly is, there's probably only about 35, 36 colonies now surviving in the whole of Great Britain, where it used to be widespread all the way up to Cumbria. And we're fortunate we've got two in Warwickshire, one around Ryton and the other one near Haywood. Everyone has seen this, thinks this is the most daintiest flyer of any butterfly. It's very frustrating also to photographers, because I've actually followed these butterflies, especially the males, early in the season, and it's got a very weak flight. It looks like it's going to land any minute, but I'll follow these for 30 minutes before it's actually landed to nectar on one of its favourite nectar sources, the ragged robin in the picture. But again, once you've seen this butterfly and you've seen it flying, you can't really mistake it for anything else, certainly in this country. Again, sometimes I get very excited phone calls. People say, I've seen this yellow butterfly. It was going like a bat out of hell across this field. Was it a brimstone or clouded yellow? Clouded yellow. Oh, how do you know that? It was 200 yards away. It's a clouded yellow. Why? Because this one flies, as described, like a bat out of hell, low over the ground, very, very fast. If you see a yellow butterfly flying like that, it's a clouded yellow. Whereas the next one, the brimstone, is what we call a hedge hugger. It will fly daintily along hedgerows, up and over them, round them, whatever. And you'll see a lot of these now. And there's another interesting fact. This is a female brimstone. It's got these lovely scallop wings. Again, it's the only butterfly that's got that. This is what we call sexual dimorphism. The female is sort of what we call off-white. It actually looks very white in flight. And the male is sulphur yellow, the old name for brimstone. If you go on a walk now and you look for these butterflies, I can guarantee you'll see 10 males for every female you see. This is because in all species of butterfly, the females are always more secretive. So if you see a yellow butterfly, especially now, it's going to be a brimstone. We don't normally get clouded yellows coming into Warwickshire until at least July, unless it's an exceptional year. Moving on to the three whites that can cause difficulty, or most people get hung up about. First one is the large white. Now, the key thing here, I'll put the male up here, and the female, you can see all these black spots. The black on a large white is jet black. It's very black. Even so, when it has its wing closed on this creeping thistle, you can see the black spots and the black tip through it. When you look at this in flight, you can still see the jet black tips. It's very, very nice. So don't forget, when you walk in a transect, you imagine you're walking in a 5-metre box. So you're only counting things really within about 2.5 metres either side of you. So you're going to get a good look at this. You can see the jet black on the wings. The small white, its close cousin. This is a better one. You get a dusting of black on the wings. And it's a dusting here. When it flies, you can't really see any black on it. And again, when it settles, you can see it's very, very small amounts of darkness. And when you see them both together, large white is superficially a little bit bigger, but you can't really mistake them because one's got the jet black, the other one hasn't. So let's do them both together. Absolutely jet black, just a dusting of black. So much so, even when it settles, you can see the black through the wings, whereas this is like a dirty yellow. No black showing really through the wings at all. The other white, which is probably our most common and widespread white in Warwickshire, certainly this is called the green vein white. It loves damp conditions. So particularly in woodlands, you're going to see far more green vein whites than you are large and small whites. The large whites and small whites will only go into woodlands to actually find nectar. A lot of people call them cabbage whites because they actually are pest species on a lot of brassica plants. So again, this one you'll see very, very soon all over the Heart of England forest. It loves the wild crucifers like Jack by the Hedge, lady smock, bittercress, all these types of plants. And again, it tends to fly in a very distinctive zigzag type of flight, low down. So you'll see this going along the hedge, zigzagging to side along the hedgerows. whereas the other two are more powerful flyers because, again, we don't normally, unless you're near allotments or oilseed rape fields, you don't normally see small whites and large whites in Warwickshire, certainly in any numbers until July. You're going to see a lot more of these butterflies. This is the one, if in doubt in a woodland, it will be a green vein white. And the final one I'll put up here is the orange tip, very similar to the brimstone. It's flying now, but you'll see, as I say, 10 male orange tips for every one female you'll see. And the key to the identification really is when they settle, get this lovely green marbling on the underside. So much so you can actually see the orange tips of the male through it. And they tend to nectar a lot. So again, in flight, because they're flying low down, so you think, oh, that's a low flying butterfly. Is it a green vein white? Is it an orange tip female? You can see these jet black tips on the orange tip females, but vast majority you'll see will be green vein whites. So again, two very fast flyers. They're more directional. They'll fly in a straight line across a field or into a woodland or from plant to plant. More low down, zigzaggy type flight. This is the one you'll see. These are the two you'll see early in the year. These two round here, you don't generally see till July onwards. And again, between these two, don't forget, absolutely jet black. You're looking for undersides, whereas this is a dirty sort of yellowy white. Now I'm going to move on to the hair streaks. As I say, if you want to see a hair streak like this, there are three conditions where you'll see it on the ground. The first is when it first hatches in July, it comes out of, it's got a relationship with ants, it comes out of the ant nest, it will sit to dry its wings on something like a bracken frond, and then it will fly into the canopy. So if you go very early in the morning, certainly before 11 o'clock, really around about 9:30, 10 o'clock, you want to walk through a woodland, you can often see these when they're first hatched, drying their wings. But you have to walk very slowly and very carefully because the merest vibration, and all you see is, what was that flying into the sky? And it's gone. And also, you think being purple, it would stand out against the green over bracken frond. But they have this knack of just being over the edge of the bracken frond. So you have to peer over to have a look at it. And in doing so, you disturb it and it flies off. So just bear in mind if you want to see it. The other two conditions to see this butterfly is if we've had a series of several dry days, which has dried the aphid honeydew on top of the oak canopy, or alternatively, we've had a lot of heavy rain that's washed the aphid honeydew off, then these butterflies will come down to the ground to take sustenance from mud. So go do mud puddling and look for some liquid sustenance from there. It's best if you look for it really when it's been dry, because again, because it's a canopy species, if we've had heavy rain, it can decimate the numbers of this butterfly. So the best bet is go after about 3 very hot days in July and go and have a look down some mud puddles. You can even make your mud puddles yourself, and that can attract the butterfly down. Next butterfly is the white-legged hair streak. I said very, very elusive. You've got some good colonies of this in the heart of England forest. Now, if you really want to see this, I would suggest if you go before 11 o'clock, between 9 and 11 o'clock, early in the season, which is generally now just the end of June, you'll see all the males combating. If you go to a place like, and if you do that on wood, you'll see them there. If you go to Banham's Wood, then what I suggest is you find out where the creeping thistle is, and you go and look at all the creeping thistle heads, and you'll find them on those. And be aware that this is a canny butterfly. Most butterflies will sit on top of the butterfly, the flower, and nectar. This will often sit on the side of the flower and throw its tongue over the top, which makes it perfectly camouflaged with this white W, where it gets its name from. So they can be tricky to spot, but once you get your eye in, it's much better. I've already talked about the brown hair streak and how elusive it is. Again, just to give you an indication of how elusive it is, when the males hatch out, and most butterflies, the males hatch out first, they go straight to normally an ash tree in Warwickshire, to Leck again, if you like. They just sit up there on top of the trees. That they sit right in the middle of the leaf. You can't see them, even with binoculars or a telescope, and wait for the females to make their way to the tree. The female will then get mated. It'll stay in the tree for anything up to 7 days while its eggs mature. And the only time then you really like to see it is when the females come out of the tree and start looking for blackthorn to lay their eggs on. And again, up until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you look for these, and you just wait for a flash of orange going around the blackthorn. And you have to be very quick on your toes, because when they find a suitable blackthorn, they go round it like a fireman going down a fireman's pole and disappear into the undergrowth very quickly. So you have to be very quick to get to where you think you've seen a brown hair streak, unless you get very lucky and they sit like this for the photographers. But they are tricky butterflies to see. Again, the green hair streak, thankfully it's our only green butterfly, so you can't mistake this for anything else. What I will say is, in Warwickshire, our colonies mainly are based on common bird's foot trefoil, but it has an association with hawthorn, especially the males. So the males tend to again lek where there's isolated or sheltered hawthorn in the sun. And again, the trick to find these species is as the hawthorn flowers tend to come into flower, the green hair streaks tend to appear. When the hawthorn tends to go over, the green hair streak finishes. That's the trick of finding them in Warwickshire. But they're very easy. Once you know a decent colony, especially around Princethorpe, you just go and find a sunny hawthorn when it first started, and the males will be around there, and they pose like this. They're very easy to photograph. But as I say, you can't mistake them for anything else. They always settle with their wings closed like this. Then I'm going to move on to the coppers. We've only got one copper in Warwickshire, the small copper. And you'd say this is the robin of the butterfly world. You only see them in most places in very small numbers, 1s and 2s, but they are very feisty. They'll set up a territory, especially the males, on some flower head, and they'll actually go and fight and chase anything that comes into their vision. And that includes things like dragonflies that will eat them. So they're not very bright, but so they stay there. And they'll nectar ferociously, and then sort of going back onto their perch. And once you've found them, they keep coming back virtually to the same flower head. So once you've seen a flash of orange, the trick is just stand still for a few seconds and wait to come back to you. Don't try and chase it. Now coming on to the blues. This is the brown argus. It was very, very rare in Warwickshire and was virtually confined to sites where its main caterpillar food plant was rock rose. But thanks to climate change, it's now changed its food plant to various species of cranesbill, mainly dove's foot and cut-leafed. And so now it's found all over Warwickshire. Now the key to this species is notice these orange, what we call luneals, as opposed to spots around the wings. And again, always get told off in my English here, but we look for a missing spot here in the brown argus on its forewing, or conversely, we look for 2 spots there. So missing spot, 2 spots. Now again, this is a common blue, and males you can't mistake because they're varying, always this blue, but the females go from 90% blue to 10% of them are this dark form, which can confuse people. And again, what we look for is spots here where they're missing in the brown argus. Only 1 spot there if it's got its wings folded down a bit. And the other thing is, if you see these in flight, once you've seen them, the brown argus looks very silvery in flight, whereas this one, you can see, sometimes you can actually see the red on the wings. It looks completely different. So there we are. Which one's which? Which one's got the missing spot? Which one's got the very orange? Brown argus, common blue. Other blue species we've got is the holly blue. Again, this has already been seen in Warwickshire, just starting to come out. One of the favourite places to see this is places like churchyards, which have got lots of ivy and holly in them. But again, this is another hedge hugger. And people sometimes say, I've seen this blue butterfly in my garden, what is it? I said, what did it do? Well, it flew over my fencing or hedges. Couldn't get a good look at it. So it's a holly blue. Because this is the one you will get in your garden. You very rarely get the common blue in your garden. And again, it's also the brown argus, the common blue, fly very low to the ground. Very rarely do they go up. Whereas this one, again, it's a hedge hugger. It flies over things. So if you see this flying around the tops of the trees or over hedges, it's going to be a holly blue, even at some considerable distance. The other blue species is the small blue. Again, this was very rare, but thanks to some conservation we've done, we've now got this up to hopefully about 30 colonies now from the 3 that was in the 1990s. Its only food plant is kidney vetch, and so we're looking to sort of increase this. The key to conservation of this species actually is the management of its only caterpillar food plant, kidney vetch, which unfortunately suffers in droughts and disappears, so the butterfly disappears. But this is our smallest British butterfly. And again, once you've seen how small this is, probably smaller than your thumbnail on your little finger, you can't really mistake it for any other species, because even though some people say those species of blue are small, this is half the size. And also it's got this silver underside, similar, you might say, to the holly blue, but again, it flies in different habitats. So it's got normally likes, well, it does like calcareous, limey type grasslands, mainly found around Southam in Warwickshire, but we've got now colonies over towards Bidford of this species as part of our conservation strategy. Now this is why we've gone up from 37 to 38 species in Warwickshire. This is the Chalkill blue, and we had a particular conservation effort on 8 sites in Warwickshire where its only food plant is called horseshoe vetch. It was absent. We've now introduced that into successfully into 3 sites already, 5 more to go. And this butterfly has now colonised Ettington Cutting, those who know the road verges near Ettington Village. It's a small population at the moment, but we're hopeful this population will build up, and in a few years' time we'll be able to see its thousands with all the horseshoe vetch we planted there. I think Heart of England Forest have got aspirations to get this into Worcestershire in a certain little place it's got. So again, look forward to helping them there as well. Now coming on to the Nymphalidaes. First one is the White Admiral. Now, to give you a clue about how this butterfly flies, on the continent, there's several species of this, and they're all called gliders. So you can imagine this sort of in a woodland ride setting. It will go round and it glides round the edge of a woodland edge very gracefully. Once you've seen that, there's no other butterfly that flies like it. Just to compare, we'll come on to it in a minute, but the Purple Emperor, it soars, it doesn't glide, it goes very fast, which superficially is much bigger as well. The other thing is, we did experiments in Warwickshire. This butterfly, again, is associated, you might say, with bramble. As the bramble starts to flower, this butterfly starts to emerge sometime about mid-June, and it ends when the bramble starts to finish. 99-point-something% of its nectaring is on bramble. So again, if you just want to see this butterfly, suggest you go to a woodland like Coton Park, go in the early evening between about 5 and 6 on a really hot sunny day, find a nice sunny hot place where the bramble is in bloom, and you should pick up a White Admiral. Mention the Purple Emperor. Everyone wants to see the male Purple Emperor, as you see in this picture, as we say, grounded, and it's got some lovely habits. It comes down to take nectar from some of the foulest things you see in woodland, foxscat being particularly favourite for it. The old butterfly collectors used to do all sorts of concoctions. Matthew Oates, the renowned Purple Emperor expert, if he offers you a lift in his car, never go in it in July, because if you do, he keeps Malaysian shrimp paste opened in his car. It goes off with the heat of the car, and then he puts it down as bait. Now, in his defence, that works, but by God, I once had a lift from him, never again. So, but yeah, so everyone wants to see this butterfly. As I say, the best thing is to monitor it as its male congregation areas. Otherwise, it's very elusive. If you really want to see the Purple Emperor in Warwickshire, I always recommend you go to Oversley Wood near Ulster, and you go to an area called the Triangle. It's a triangle of roads, and because it's got various shade conditions and normally a bit of damp, this is the banker place to find the Purple Emperor. And if I say also Oversley Wood is heavily used by dog walkers, it will give you another reason why you often see grounded Purple Emperors in Oversley Wood. Next butterfly is a Red Admiral. Again, this surprises some people, but this is mainly a migrant. It comes in, so you don't normally see Red Admiral, certainly in any great numbers, until, again, July. The numbers peak sort of August, September. Great place for seeing Red Admirals is if you ever go to a wood that's got ivy on a big tree, it's always a recommended experience anyway, but actually just stand under the tree and look up. Eventually, if it's a nice sunny hot day, you'll see lots of bees and hornet shoes in the ivy. But every so often you'll see a flash of wings and you'll see the red admirals up there. It's also good for seeing another species I'll show you in a minute called the comma. That's a recommended experience for red admirals. Painted lady, again, it's another butterfly like the red admiral. There's nothing else like it. Again, it's a migrant. It comes over in, sometimes it's billions. It all depends on what happens in January and February in the Atlas Mountains. If they get a real downpour in that area at that time, numbers build up very rapidly. And then the painted lady will come over here in either 4 stages, first into southern Spain, then northern Spain, southern France, northern France, then over to us. Or on exceptional years, it can actually fly all the way from the Atlas Mountains in one go. And you can tell the difference between the painted ladies, how they've come over, because the painted ladies that are more sandy colour are the ones that's flown directly here. But there's nothing else that looks like a painted lady. Small tortoiseshell. It's actually shown signs of a bit of recovery in Warwickshire. It's unfortunately suffered in recent years from a parasite that's come over from the continent called Sturmabella that parasites its caterpillars, and it's a third parasite that has a go at them. So overall numbers have suffered greatly. But you'll see this species usually very common in June, in July and August. But again, when you look at it, there's no other species, but both underside and upper side, that looks like this species. So you shouldn't have any real difficulty telling it apart from other butterflies. Likewise, the peacock, we've only got one butterfly that's got 4 eyes on it. Occasionally on the underside, it can be mistaken for the red admiral, but again, because of its habitats, again, you like to see now lots of peacocks about, especially in woodlands. They do very good. They'll open the wings to show you definitely it's a peacock. But even when they've got their wings closed, they will flash their wings. Again, it's a defense measure every so often, so birds don't peck at them. And so again, it won't be long before you can tell definitely it's a peacock rather than a red admiral. Comma I mentioned earlier, again, it's got these lovely scallop wings, got 2 broods a year. Again, its favourite food plants is one of the ones is bramble or ivy in the autumn. Often will settle with its wings like this, showing the little white flash here where it gets its name from, the comma. But again, really, it's again an orange butterfly flying around. It's the only one, and you can't really mistake it for anything else. I'm going to mention now the fritillaries. This is the male silver-washed fritillary. Again, mention these sex brands. The silver-washed fritillary male's got 3 on it, but it gets its name from this silver washing on the hind wings. And if you ever see a powerful orange butterfly flying in a woodland ride, it's going to be a silver-washed fritillary. They're big, they're bold. Also recommended is, especially early July, is to go out and look for the courtship display of the silver-washed fritillary. It's great. You'll see the female flying about 2 meters off the ground in a straight line, and then you'll see the males flying round her in ever decreasing circles, showering them in pheromones to make them attractive. And it's a great thing to watch, great natural spectacle. Dark green fritillary, again, used to be very rare in Warwickshire, just 1 colony. We've now got it up to at least 9, probably 11. This is a grassland butterfly. You occasionally get it wandering into woodlands to find nectar because it does spread out from its homes. But again, if you ever go to places like round Combrook or Southam, and you see this flying around, it really doesn't fly like a silver-washed fritillary. It bombs. It really goes at a rate of knot over the grasslands, quite low, very difficult to photograph. You have to go at certain times of the day. So if you see something orange bombing around quite low over the grasslands, it's going to be a dark green fritillary. But again, if it settles, you'll see the green on the underside rather than the silver washing, which gives it its name. And finally, you won't see this around here. It's very, very rare, the pearl border fritillary. There's only 1 colony at Brighton in Warwickshire, and that's very much under threat. So, but it's a very small fritillary. Give you an idea, when it comes out, it used to be called the April fritillary, but usually we don't normally see it till the first week of May, and it lasts for about a month. And it likes open clearings, coppicing, where there's abundant violets, little violets in the free of things like bramble. So it's got very particular habitats, but when you do see it, places like the wild forest, it can be really common because of the way they manage their woodlands up there. Now finally coming on to the browns, the specklewood I mentioned has a very distinctive mate and locate strategy where the males will sit on a leaf on the side of a ride, and they'll have a battle with the male that comes past, or a female, and they'll spiral up into the air. But again, really, there's no other butterfly that has this sort of chocolatey brown colouring and yellow specks on its forewings. Marbled white, though it's black and white, is a brown butterfly in its species mix. Very, very good numbers of this all over the heart of England forest. Again, used to be a lot rarer than it is nowadays. But again, you see a black and white butterfly in July flying along grassy areas. You know it's a marbled white. There's nothing really you can mistake it with. Gatekeeper, again, I'd argue shouldn't really mistake this butterfly, but technically what you look for here is two pupils in the eye spot on the forewings. But this butterfly, again, as its name implies, it's a bit of a hedge hugger. So you find it along sides of woodland rides or along hedgerows, and it's avid feeder of things like bramble nearby. And sometimes you can see them in the 10s and 20s on every bramble bloom along a hedgerow. It tends to come out a bit later as well. So it's in July, August. Whereas the meadow brown can come out from mid-May onwards. It is a lot bigger. It's a duller brown, so it's not so orange. You can see here, technically, it's got the one pupil in its eye spot. Don't forget, it's got two pupils on the underside. But again, once you've seen a meadow brown and a gatekeeper, I would argue very strongly you shouldn't really mix them up. And then the ringlet, again, comes out often now mid-June. Loves damp grasslands, so it loves woodland rides. And when it's at peak numbers, often will outnumber meadow browns in a woodland. It can be that common. And again, it's got a very, very distinctive flight. It's got a bobbing flight. So you can imagine it's sort of like a yo-yo going up and down. Imagine a butterfly bit on a string like a yo-yo, and that's how it flies along. And also when it's very fresh, when it first comes out, it's got a very distinctive white fringe all the way around the outside. And so you see this dark, very chocolatey butterfly bobbing up and down with a white fringe. It's got to be a ringlet. And the final butterfly is a small heath. Again, very good numbers of small heath in the heart of England holdings. It used to be the most abundant butterfly in the whole of Britain, but it's declined because if it goes extinct in an area, it doesn't recolonize very quickly. But the great thing, of course, about the heart of England forest, all your landscapes are connected. So if it does something that goes wrong in one place, it can actually wander along and colonize again. And the best place to see this heart of England forest is actually follow the footpaths or tracks of vehicles on your holdings, because it lays its eggs on the edge of these tracks on fescue grasses. So again, that's where it's most common, and it'll often bask on the bare ground on these tracks, and you'll disturb it and it'll fly a bit further on and go straight down and bask on the ground again. But believe me, with this coloration underneath, sometimes very difficult to spot, where you think, sure, I saw it land there. You just have to sort of keep your eye on. Just a reminder as the talk's coming to the end, we also include immature stages of butterflies. So you've got the brown hair streak eggs here. That's why I said they're easy to find. It's sort of jet white sea urchins on a black stem, small tortoiseshell caterpillars on nettles here, and sometimes you're lucky enough you can find the chrysalis or pupa nearby. So again, you've recalled all these butterflies. And I mentioned earlier, also encourage obviously recording of moths, and these are 6 very common day-flying moths you might see on your transects. And if you remember the grizzled skipper, I'd argue the lattice heath here looks nothing like the grizzled skipper, and this is the burnet companion here that was superficially might say looks like the dingy skipper, but you see the orange underneath. When these fly, you can actually see the orange, so you know it's not a dingy skipper. And all moths always land with their wings like this, sort of straight back. They don't perch like a butterfly with the wings close together. And just for the record, this is a 6-spot burnet because it's got 6 spots. on each wing. This is the narrow-bordered 5-spot burnet, which has obviously got 5 spots on the wing. Cinnabar moth, which likes the ragwort. And the final one here is the mother Shipton moth, and it gets its name from the witch that supposedly lived in Yorkshire, called Mother Shipton. And you can see here the long nose, the eye, and the mouth of the witch. So that's how it gets its name. And finally, whatever you do, always encourage all recorders when it comes around in July to take part in the big bud fly count. And that's the talk. Thank you very much.